Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Audra's mind was a storm of fury and desperation, each thought colliding violently with the next as she paced the grand yet cold halls of the Newman estate, the echo of her heels against the marble floor sounding like a ticking clock counting down to the moment when her patience would finally snap, and she would unleash the secret that could upend everything. The secret that Victor, with all his ruthlessness and cunning, had buried deep enough to make her question whether anyone could ever find it, and yet the knowledge of it burned in her chest like fire, a relentless, consuming heat that made every breath feel heavy and every heartbeat thunder in her ears as she considered the enormity of what she was about to do, knowing that revealing it could destroy not only the Newman empire but also the lives of everyone she had ever cared about, including Nate, the man she loved and lost, whose heart she still yearned to claim even if it meant walking through a minefield of lies, betrayal, and enemies she never thought she would call allies. For weeks, she had watched from the shadows as Nate struggled under the weight of his complicated relationships with the Newman family, torn between loyalty, love, and the insidious whispers of Victor's manipulations, and Audra had realized that if she wanted him back, she could no longer sit on the sidelines, pretending to be the sweet, innocent figure he thought she was. Because Nate deserved the truth, raw and unfiltered, and more importantly, she deserved a chance to fight for the man she could not live without, even if it meant partnering with the very people who had schemed against her, people who thrived on chaos, deception, and the downfall of anyone standing in their way. She thought of Jack Abbott, whose rivalry with Victor had always been fiery and personal, and of Victoria, whose cold, calculating demeanor often masked vulnerabilities that could be exploited if one knew where to push. And she realized that her alliances, though temporary and fraught with peril, could shift the balance in her favor, giving her leverage, power, and the slim, tantalizing possibility of reclaiming Nate's love before it slipped entirely into the hands of someone else, someone like Amanda or Phyllis, whose presence in Genoa City always seemed to stir trouble and rivalry she was determined to use to her advantage, all while keeping her own conscience at bay, though it screamed at her with every fiber of her being, warning her that playing with such dangerous forces could backfire in ways she could not imagine. Her plan was meticulous, a chess game where each move had to be precise, each word measured, and every ally chosen with the utmost care because betrayal in Genoa City came in layers. Cloak over a dagger, and one misstep could spell disaster, yet Audra's determination was unwavering as she rehearsed conversations in her mind, imagining the fear in Victor's eyes when she revealed what she knew, the incredulity on Jack's face when she suggested a temporary truce to topple Victor's latest scheme, and most importantly, the way Nate's expression might soften, the walls around his heart cracking just enough to let her in again, because she knew that underneath all the drama, all the manipulation and all the chaos, Nate had always loved her, and love, she believed, was a force strong enough to withstand even the darkest of secrets. And yet, as she reached for her phone to contact one of Victor's most despised rivals, the message in her mind ready to be typed but trembling in her fingers, doubt crept in, whispering venomously that she might be making a mistake, that by allying with those who wished to see the Newmans fall, she was stepping onto a path from which there might be no return, a path where her intentions could be twisted, her loyalty questioned, and her love for Nate used against her in ways she could not control, but the fire in her heart would not be extinguished, and with a deep breath that felt like a battle cry against fate itself, she pressed send, signaling the beginning of a series of events that would shock Genoa City to its core, where whispers would become screams, alliances would crumble, secrets would erupt like volcanoes, and the delicate web of trust and deceit that held the Newman empire together would tremble under the weight of Audra's daring gambit. She imagined the fallout, the clandestine meetings in dimly lit offices where the city's most influential and dangerous would plot and counterplot, the secret slipping through fingers like sand until no one knew who could be trusted. And in the midst of the turmoil, she would stand, resolute, unyielding, a woman transformed by love and desperation, prepared to face the wrath of Victor, the cunning of Jack, and the skepticism of Nate, all while holding close the one truth that could save or doom her, the secret she alone possessed, the power to shift the tides of loyalty, love, and revenge, and the knowledge that in a city built on ambition and betrayal, only the boldest, fiercest, and most determined could hope to survive and perhaps, just perhaps, win back the heart of the man she had never stopped loving, the man whose name echoed in her soul with every heartbeat, whose memory haunted her dreams, and whose future she intended to reclaim at any cost, no matter how many enemies she had to face, how many lies she had to tell, or how many pieces of herself she had to risk shattering in the process. The storm had begun, the board was set, and Audra, with fire in her eyes and resolve in her heart, was ready to play the most dangerous game of her life, a game where love, vengeance, power, and betrayal collided, and where only one truth mattered, that no secret was ever too dangerous if it could bring her back to Nate, the one man who had always been her anchor, her obsession, and the center of a world that seemed determined to pull them apart. Yet somehow, against all odds, Audra believed she could rewrite fate itself, one secret, one ally, and one daring move at a time, knowing that in the heart of chaos, love could still find a way to triumph, if only she had the courage to seize it before the city swallowed them both whole. Audra's plan, once conceived in a flurry of emotion and desperation, began to take on a life of its own, each element twisting and turning in ways she could hardly predict, as the gears of Genoa City's most dangerous and influential families churned inexorably toward a collision she both feared and craved. Every move she made, every whispered threat, every clandestine conversation, had consequences that rippled far beyond her immediate understanding, yet she pressed forward, fueled by the memory of Nate's eyes, the way his voice had always calmed her chaos, and how, in moments of intimacy, he had revealed a vulnerability that no one else had seen, a vulnerability that now became her compass in the storm of manipulation, deception, and shifting loyalties that surrounded her, as she reached out to Jack Abbott under the guise of needing his insight into Victor's latest corporate maneuver, knowing full well that Jack would see through her veneer of innocence, yet also recognizing that his thirst for undermining Victor could be harnessed in her favor, and so she crafted every word with the precision of a master strategist, threading the needle between truth and subterfuge, all the while imagining Nate's reaction if he were ever to uncover the lengths she was willing to go to win him back. And in that same dark corner of her mind, she plotted her interactions with Victoria, knowing that Victoria's pride and desire for control could be weaponized if Audra could carefully present herself as an ally rather than an adversary, someone who understood the stakes and shared a temporary, mutually beneficial goal. And yet, the inherent danger of that relationship gnawed at her, for Victoria, unlike Jack, had an instinct for detecting hidden agendas, and one misstep could spell disaster, turning an invaluable partnership into a vendetta that could ruin everything Audra had meticulously orchestrated, leaving her exposed, vulnerable, and most terrifyingly alone. And while these high-stakes alliances swirled around her like a tempest, Audra's thoughts inevitably returned to Nate, to the tender moments before misunderstandings and lies had crept in between them, to the stolen glances, the late-night confessions, the laughter that had once filled quiet corners of his apartment, and the subtle ways he had shown that despite the chaos of his life, he had always held a place in his heart for her. And it was that belief, fragile and precious, that fueled her audacity, that allowed her to navigate treacherous waters without faltering, even as the shadow of Victor loomed over every move she made. A constant reminder that power in Genoa City came with ruthless consequences, and that even the slightest miscalculation could lead to ruin, scandal, or worse, betrayal from someone she had thought she could trust. The city itself seemed to respond to her urgency, the streets whispering secrets she could almost hear if she listened closely enough, the skyscrapers reflecting the glint of opportunity in their glassy facades, the alleyways hinting at clandestine meetings and whispered deals that could either aid or hinder her mission. And she felt an intoxicating mixture of fear and exhilaration as she positioned herself in the very eye of the storm, aware that every step was being watched, every word potentially intercepted, every ally secretly weighing their own interests. And yet Audra pressed forward, believing in the power of her own cunning, the sharpness of her mind, and the undeniable force of her desire to reclaim Nate, even if it meant risking everything she had ever known or loved. Her interactions with Victor became particularly charged, the air between them thick with tension and unspoken threats, for she had gleaned enough of his patterns to understand that his sense of invincibility could be his weakness, and she carefully prepared to use that arrogance against him, constructing scenarios in which even a hint of revelation about his buried secrets could send shockwaves through his carefully controlled empire, destabilizing the alliances he had built and creating just enough chaos for her plan to take root, while all the time she maintained the outward appearance of compliance, the polite nods, the measured words, the carefully crafted smiles that concealed a mind racing 1,000 miles per hour toward her ultimate goal. And in the quiet moments when she was alone with her thoughts, the weight of her actions pressed heavily upon her, A reminder that love and vengeance in Genoa City were never simple, that every choice carved new paths in the lives of those around her, and that in seeking to reclaim Nate, she might very well unleash forces she could no longer control, and yet the risk seemed both necessary and inevitable, for a life without Nate's love was a life incomplete, hollow, and unworthy of the audacity and brilliance that coursed through her veins. And as she reached out to the Newman enemies she had identified, individuals whose resentment, jealousy, and desire for power made them perfect instruments for her strategy, she felt the thrill of dangerous alliances spark to life, knowing that she must tread carefully, balancing persuasion with intimidation, offering the allure of victory against Victor's dominance while keeping her ultimate objective shrouded in mystery. For in Genoa City, trust was currency more precious than money, more lethal than a weapon, and more fleeting than the promises whispered in the dark, and Audra, with her mind sharpened and her heart aflame, intended to wield it with ruthless precision. And yet, even amidst plotting, bargaining, and scheming, she allowed herself rare moments of reflection, imagining Nate receiving fragments of her truth, feeling the collision of disbelief and hope in his expression, envisioning their eventual reconciliation, imagining that fragile, beautiful connection restored amidst the chaos she orchestrated. For despite the potential fallout, despite the enemy she risked making, despite the moral tightrope she walked above the abyss, Audra remained convinced that love, the love she had never surrendered, was worth every gamble, every lie, every strategic maneuver, every whispered threat, and every alliance with those who might one day turn on her. And it was that unwavering conviction that propelled her forward, hour by hour, decision by decision, secret by secret, as the city's rhythm of ambition and betrayal beat around her, echoing in her chest like a drum of destiny, reminding her that in a place where fortunes could be won or destroyed with a single revelation, where loyalty was as fleeting as the shifting tides, and where desire often collided violently with duty, only the boldest, most daring, and most unrelenting could hope to emerge victorious, and Audra, with every fiber of her being, had chosen to be among them, ready to face the fire, embrace the chaos, and challenge fate itself, knowing that the revelation of the secret she held, dangerous, devastating, and explosive, could topple empires, ignite feuds, and ultimately, if played perfectly, return Nate to her arms. And in that possibility, she found a reason to endure every threat, every risk, every betrayal, and every sleepless night. For in the world of Genoa City, where ambition and desire ruled supreme, where every smile hid a dagger and every word could ignite a war, Audra's courage, intellect, and unyielding heart were her greatest weapons, and she would wield them without hesitation, without regret, and without fear, prepared to confront Victor, outwit his enemies, outmaneuver her own doubts, and seize the one thing she had never stopped wanting, the love, trust, and heart of Nate, the man whose absence had left a void she refused to accept, and whose return, orchestrated through brilliance, bravery, and calculated risk, was a destiny she was determined to claim, even if it meant shaking the foundations of Genoa City itself, shattering alliances, exposing secrets, and facing consequences more severe than anything she had ever imagined. For Audra knew that in a world where secrets were currency, love was a battlefield, and betrayal lurked behind every corner. Only those willing to play the ultimate game could hope to survive and triumph, and she, with the fire of desire and the cunning of a master strategist, was ready to prove beyond a shadow of doubt that she was not just a player in the game, but the force capable of rewriting it, shaping it, and seizing her heart's ultimate prize, Nate, no matter the cost. As Audra's plan deepened and her entanglements grew ever more complex, the weight of her secret pressed harder on her shoulders, a relentless, invisible hand reminding her that in Genoa City, no action existed in isolation, no alliance came without strings, and no truth remained buried forever. For the city itself seemed to hum with a conspiratorial energy, every whispered conversation, every glance in a crowded room, every misstep on the polished floors of Newman Enterprises carrying the potential to unravel months of careful strategizing. Yet Audra, undeterred by the enormity of the stakes, pressed forward with a precision that belied the storm of emotion churning within her, knowing that the only way to reclaim Nate, to awaken the love they had shared and rekindle the fragile flame that had never truly died, was to navigate this labyrinth of deception with the cunning of a seasoned tactician, the patience of a predator stalking its prey, and the courage of someone willing to risk everything for a chance at happiness. And so she meticulously plotted her next moves, considering every ally, every adversary, every shadowed figure who might influence the outcome, while simultaneously rehearsing the moment she would confront Nate, imagining the disbelief, the hurt, the confusion, and finally, the hope in his eyes, knowing that this emotional crescendo would be the key to winning back not just his trust, but his heart. Yet even as she crafted these scenarios in her mind, Audra could feel the eyes of Victor Newman upon her, metaphorical and perhaps literal, a weight that pressed down with a suffocating inevitability. For Victor, with his uncanny ability to anticipate moves before they were made, was the ever-present force threatening to undo her every effort, a man whose intelligence was matched only by his ruthlessness, and she knew that to outmaneuver him, she would have to be not just careful but brilliant, employing misdirection, subtlety, and psychological acumen in ways that would leave him second-guessing even his own instincts. And as she considered the possibilities, a shiver of both fear and exhilaration ran through her, because the danger, the thrill, and the uncertainty were as intoxicating as the thought of Nate's return to her arms. She turned her attention to Jack Abbott, understanding that his ambitions and lingering vendettas against Victor made him a potential ally, but one whose loyalty was unpredictable, a fact that required Audra to navigate the delicate balance of offering just enough incentive to engage him without revealing the full depth of her intentions. And so she began planting seeds in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, each word chosen like a surgical incision, each gesture calibrated to suggest collaboration while masking the true objective: the reclamation of Nate's love, the revelation of the secret, and the orchestration of events that would shift the city's power dynamics in her favor. And as she worked, she felt the exhilaration of control, the heady sense that for the first time in weeks, perhaps months, she was no longer merely reacting to the chaos around her, but actively shaping it, bending it to her will with the artistry of someone who had learned to survive, to fight, and to conquer in a world where few dared to tread with audacity, intelligence, and passion combined. Victoria, too, became a critical piece in her elaborate game, for Audra knew that appealing to Victoria's sense of pride, her need for control, and her desire to protect the Newman legacy could be both a shield and a weapon, a relationship that required careful handling, calculated compliments, strategic revelations, and just the right touch of feigned vulnerability, all designed to extract cooperation without triggering suspicion. And as she orchestrated this delicate dance, Audra could almost feel the city itself leaning in, anticipating the moment when her secret would no longer be hers alone, when whispers would turn to conversations, conversations into confrontations, and confrontations into a series of cascading events that could either restore her love with Nate or annihilate her in the process. Yet she embraced the uncertainty, knowing that inaction was no longer an option, that to reclaim what she had lost, to seize the life and love that had always been her compass, she had to step boldly into the fray, even if it meant allying with those she had once feared, manipulating those she had once respected, and deceiving those she had once loved. For in Genoa City, only the audacious, the daring, and the relentless survived and thrived. And as she reached out to the rivals and enemies of the Newmans, carefully selecting her words and gauging their reactions, she felt a surge of power mixed with trepidation, aware that these alliances, temporary as they might be, could be the fulcrum on which the entire city tilted, that a single miscalculation could undo months of planning, and that the moral and emotional cost of her choices might forever alter her own sense of self. Yet she steeled herself, focusing on the end goal, visualizing the moment when Nate, caught between disbelief and awe, would finally recognize the lengths she had gone to for him, would finally see her not just as a participant in the chaos, but as the architect of a new reality where love, passion, and strategy intertwined to create something powerful, something unbreakable, something that could withstand even the storms of betrayal, ambition, and greed that constantly roiled the city's elite. In the quieter moments when she allowed herself to breathe, Audra reflected on the emotional stakes, on the memories that had brought her to this point, the laughter, the heartbreak, the stolen moments of tenderness, and the unspoken understanding that had always existed between her and Nate. And these reflections became both her anchor and her weapon, reminding her that while secrets, power, and alliances were tools she could wield, the ultimate goal was human, tangible, and profoundly emotional, a beating heart in the hands of someone she loved more than life itself. And so she prepared, rehearsed, and refined every interaction, every conversation, every subtle manipulation, knowing that the revelation of her secret, when timed correctly, would have repercussions far beyond her personal desires, shaking the foundations of friendships, family bonds, and corporate empires alike. creating ripples that would forever alter the balance of power in Genoa City, yet giving her the hope, the tantalizing possibility that, amidst the chaos, she could reclaim not just love but agency, control, and destiny itself. And as she stood in the shadows of the Newman estate, watching the city lights flicker like a constellation of possibilities, Audra felt a mixture of fear, exhilaration, and anticipation, a thrilling combination that sharpened her focus, honed her strategy, and steeled her heart, for she knew that the coming days, weeks, and months would test every facet of her resolve, every ounce of her courage, every measure of her cunning, and that at the end of this intricate, dangerous, and emotionally charged game, she could either emerge triumphant with Nate in her arms and a city reshaped by her will, or fall victim to the very forces she had sought to manipulate. Yet she would not hesitate, for the fire of her desire, the depth of her love, and the audacity of her ambition were a trifecta of force capable of confronting any obstacle, enduring any betrayal, and seizing any opportunity. And so she moved forward, step by deliberate step, conversation by carefully constructed conversation, secret by devastating secret, knowing that her heart, her mind, and her soul were fully invested, and that the city, in all its complexity, danger, and intrigue, would bear witness to the audacity, brilliance, and relentless passion of Audra, a woman determined to reclaim love, rewrite her fate, and challenge the power structures of Genoa City itself, all while keeping the beating heart of her ultimate prize, Nate, within reach, a goal that demanded everything she had, everything she was, and everything she could become.